to Cartoon Everything. Today we have the amazing Jen de Oliveira, who is the amazing cartoonist behind the Reggie books. So, Jen, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out to talk about everything cartoons, which I know you love.
I do love. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to see you. Nice to meet you, Chris.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, I know that you are a huge cartoon fanatic over many different genres of cartoons, and just over your shoulder, we can see Donald Duck from the Three Caballeros, right? And
Classic.
we also see Zero from Nightmare Before
That's a
Christmas,
popcorn book.
and Ludwig von Drake, who is one of my favorites, yeah, of all time. So we usually like to talk to people about your earliest memories. So your earliest memories we might have just touched on, but those moments when you were a kid, when you started to realize you were drawn to cartoons.
Yeah.
What were those?
I'm an 80s kid, but like oddly enough, some of my earliest and I think still fondest cartoon memories are like Disney shorts from the 50s. 1980s. And so when I was little, my earliest memories are my mom had, she got cable, which was like a box. And we had the Disney Channel, like in its very earliest brand new form. And back then it was just like so low budget. They didn't have really any content. So they were scrambling for things and even I think airing things that weren't Disney productions. But they had a show that I think actually is from the 70s that re-aired in the 80s and again in the 90s called The Mouse Factory. I found out recently like it was produced, I think, by Ward Kimball. And it basically was just like almost every episode had a theme. And so it was like a collection of Disney shorts. So you would see like a cartoon from the 30s and then the 50s.
Okay.
And so like that was so cool because it had just all of this like mashup of different, and then I think they had live action bits. Like it's kind of foggy. I don't remember it. It had like this really crazy, wacky, intro. But yeah, it had like all these compilations. So the Disney Channel back then aired all of these old Disney shorts. So like my favorites were, I think the Donald Duck ones I really loved. Yeah. And like my favorite era, I think as a whole of the Disney shorts is from like the early mid 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was a great time. The Donald shorts, the ones with Chip and Dale. Yeah, like some of those are just absolutely amazing. And I love like the Goofy Sports
Yes.
Yeah.
shorts. Like, oh, they're so good.
Yeah.
They're so good.
There was like a era, I want to say it was from the 50s, but there was a time where they would do like these, like Goofy would show you like what not to do, like how not to drive, be a nuisance in traffic and things.
Yeah.
And I think in some of the shorts, his name was Gigi Geef and he had a son. Do you remember that? Yeah.
That's wild.
There was
Yeah.
There was a narrator that would narrate,
Right.
here's what you do, kind of like the sports ones. And gosh, I want to say like maybe Goofy didn't even have ears or something. There was like, it was kind of a weird version of Goofy. But in some of them, because I think one was about like hazards in your home. There was a Donald one too, so I might be like mixing them up. But in some of the cartoons, Goofy had a son, and this was way before Max. And he was like this little, he had like kind of red hair and a little pink nose. It was so, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know that a lot of people know about that Goofy phase.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, I still love all those cartoons. And then they had like, it's just so weird because I don't know how accessible these things are now. Like if we didn't have old Disney Channel, I don't know how I would have seen a lot of those cartoons. And even ones that were like kind of like pushing this like UPA type of style, like toot, whistle, plunk, and boom.
Yeah.
Is really kind of like, you don't think Disney when you see these things. Like I just love those cartoons so much.
I love those. Yeah, the toot, whistle, plunk, and boom. I also always remember Disney had their own. It was like not unlike Yogi Bear because there was a ranger and a bear, but it was Disney's Ranger and the Bear.
Yeah.
And the ranger was round, right? Yeah, and the oh, I loved those.
I love Humphrey Bear. My favorite one is called In the Bag, where Like they did like a little song and dance, like where they're
Mhm.
picking up the litter and they go like bump bump, and the bears would like bump their butts together.
Yeah.
They basically, I think it was like the ranger was like, you can't have any snacks until you clean up this area. And so Humphrey was like desperately wanting to eat. And so he's like they're picking up all the litter. And I think he shoves it in a geyser or something. And he's like already,
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
and then it just blows up. And, poor Humphrey, nothing ever went his way. But yeah, love Humphrey Bear. It's weird because you can still sometimes see like Humphrey and the Disney parks, so there's merchandise with Humphrey
Right.
on it. But I kind of wonder, I don't think a lot of people really know Humphrey from the cartoons.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, every now and then when you're on property at the Disney parks, they'll have somewhere on property a TV setup showing
Mm.
random really old shorts. Sometimes like the hotel lobbies will have it. And you'll see the kids like crowded on the floor around. And you think like, why aren't they showing these more?
No, yeah,
Yeah.
they're
They're
really
so good.
classics. I also really love the ones with the nephews. I have my junior, you can't really see my
Oh
junior,
yeah, yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah.
I nephews, and one that I like have to rewatch every year is Trick or Treat. I have to watch that
Mhm.
one. Halloween time where like the nephews are trick or treating and Donald's like playing nasty tricks on them, so the witch has to help them out get the candy. And then one of my other really favorite ones, I think it's called Dawn's Fountain of Youth, where
Mhm.
this is like from the early 50s, where Huey, Dewey, and Louie all like they all had matching outfits, so you can't really tell who's who. And are you familiar with this one? They're like in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Like the animation's so good. Like Donald, and he's always so nasty to the little kids and the old ones, but he tricks them into like thinking that he fell in the fountain of youth and is like turning into a baby. And so
Mhm.
nephews are like so freaked out that Uncle Donald is now a baby, and how are they going to help him?
Yeah.
Alligator involved. And
Right. Yeah.
that one still just makes me laugh every time I see it.
So I guess I would be a 70s kid. So when I was a kid, I saw a lot of these shorts literally in school.
Really?
If it was a rainy day and you couldn't go out for recess, they would wheel in the projector and we would get to see them. Um, and there's one called Donald Duck in Mathemagic Land that
Yeah.
like is burned into my brain because I think they just kept replaying it like a lot. Like they didn't switch the film on the projector and we just watched it a lot. Yeah. Um, but yeah, and also some of the Ludwig von Drake things, like, or he might have introduced Donald Duck and Match, when he used to introduce the cartoons, that could have been it
Hmm.
also. But yeah, that was that.
Those ones also had like really interesting kind of effects too, where they had like some live action bits, like, in
Yeah.
it. So I think as a kid, you're like, wow, like, it just was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and the actual, like you said, the animation is so good. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things about those shorts that doesn't get discussed as much because maybe they are a little bit overlooked. Everybody is always talking about the features and how
Mhm.
Hmm.
amazing, the animation is. But they did hit that time period where like they were animating the classic characters and it was just so good. And then later on they weren't as good. They kind of like left that sweet spot.
Mhm.
Yeah. So also along with what you seemed like you were very duck forward with your Disney cartoon preference. So did you also read the comics? Did you ever get into the
No,
duck comics?
the funny thing, and I think this kind of trends a lot with just my introduction to cartooning, is I always got into everything through animation first. So even Peanuts, like I
Mm.
watched the cartoons first and then kind of understood the comics later.
Mm.
I actually didn't know about the Donald Duck and Scrooge comics until much later in life, like the Carl Barks things. And
Hmm.
I loved DuckTales as a kid when they
Mhm.
had that series. And so I realized later that a lot of those storylines were taken from some of the comics.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of funny because now as someone that works in comics, I actually ended up having access to comics later in life, and animation was more accessible to me when I was a kid.
Yeah. I remember when I found the comics that there was so many ducks. And like it just was like Like there's a whole world of, all
Yeah.
these different ways they style their feathers, and it was like,
There's the one I forget. I forget his name. Fenton, maybe. He's kind of like he's always lucky. He's a little obnoxious, but he's got like
mhm,
this weird yellow curly hair,
mhm,
always, which is kind of weird to see a duck with hair. But yeah,
yeah,
like Carl Barks was kind of given full reign, and he really expanded the
yeah,
world of ducks. And it's so cool to see the duck family tree.
yeah. It really, really was. So were you super? Did you start drawing very young too?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, I brought my little first ever drawings to share.
Whoa.
Cool.
I was one. My mom
Cool.
framed it, so they're in the original frame. Yeah, yeah. So this one I show at school visits and ask kids if they
Yeah.
can guess. A lot of them say it's Reggie, and Reggie was definitely not
Hmm.
around then. But yeah, that's you
Right.
can see his ears. I was one when I made these, and then can you guess who this is?
Gumby?
It's Gumby.
Damn it.
So I always loved. My mom said I was one when I made those. I thought it was really sweet that
Wow.
they've been framed forever, which I think was
Yeah.
really, yeah, like her way of encouraging my love of drawing. So yeah, I think I always loved drawing and was always kind of enamored, especially with animation as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That's
That is
cool.
so fun to see.
Yeah. When did you start actually trying to make your own characters or like realize you wanted to actually make your own comics?
Yeah, again, like I didn't get into comics until much, much later in life. So when I was little, I loved animation and I loved playing with stuffed animals. So everything was either like watching animation or recreating stories using like my toys and stuffed animals. But I do remember being pretty little, like maybe first grade or younger, and seeing the reluctant dragon, the thing
Mm.
where they showed like the behind the scenes of it, like,
Mhm.
I mean,
Hmm.
obviously it's not current, right? Like this was like Disney decades prior, but seeing like, oh, there's people at the studio and they make these, and it was always kind of a little bit more like staged, right? Or romanticized in those behind the scene things where like everyone was like, really into like the storyboard pitch and stuff. But I remember thinking like, wow, that's so cool. And I wanted to be a story artist. So really like ever since I was super little, like my dream all throughout like elementary, middle, high school, and then early college was like, I want to be a story artist for animation. And how I thought it was going to play out.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because really,
Hmm.
comics are just like storyboarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, it totally makes sense. So
Yeah.
did you your trajectory, like when you were growing up, did you decide, did you want to go to school to study art?
Yeah, it's funny because like I listened to your interview with Dave Roman, who's also a friend,
Yeah, Dave.
and I thought it was really interesting listening to like when he was a kid and he was like, "Oh, we were always like studying and doing comic things," and he like very like
Yeah.
entrepreneurial. And I like I didn't have that kind of drive as a kid, like I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to draw every day. For me, it was more like playing a lot, and
Mm.
my brother and I would make like little movies. So
Mm.
my mom had one of those like giant camcorders, that she'd put on her shoulder, and that would be so heavy. And like, bless her heart, she would like be so patient propping that heavy thing on her shoulder while my brother and I like used our little tiny like Disney action figures and would make
Hmm.
stories. So a lot of it was kind of almost like, I guess, filmmaking when I was
Yeah.
a kid. And then I would draw at school and make little books or make, like you were mentioning, the duck family tree.
Hmm.
My brother and I had a bunch of Snoopy stuffed animals, like probably like a dozen Snoopies, but we didn't say like, oh, this
Wow.
is Snoopy, this is Belle. Like they were Harry and Larry, and they had their their own names and their own like personas. And a lot of times I would draw photo albums, like, oh, this is when Harry and Kim, I think was the wife. Harry and Kim got married. And we would like have binders of like photo albums of our stuffed animals and kind of making histories for them. So my
Yeah.
drawing was kind of more like that, like to supplement the storytelling rather
Mm.
than kind of straight making like here is a book or here is a comic.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah. Yeah, I'm always meeting other like children's book people. So many of them are like, "Oh, I've been making books since I'm, 5 years old." I was like, "I
Mm.
didn't do that." Yeah.
What did you do with your art when you were little?
I did make comic strips. So I would do comic strips. I would do a lot of, my own really, you know, it would have a dog that looked very mysteriously a lot like Snoopy.
Right.
Yeah, but I think they lived on a boat. I have one somewhere. They lived on a boat. The dog lived on a boat. It might have been called like Salty Dog or like something like that, like the strip. So yeah, I think the dog's name was Skipper. Like it was like full tilt, like we're on a boat, but we look like peanuts. Yeah, so that's what I
Yeah,
did.
I saw a
Funny.
presentation not too long ago with Dave Pilkey, who is now
Hmm.
for Dog Man. And it was interesting because he actually showed like when he was a kid and was kind of like a troublemaker at school. Just he had like learning disabilities and the teachers
Hmm.
didn't handle it right. So he did like sent out to the hall a lot and would draw. But he had like the first iteration of Dog Man from like those days in the hall, which
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of interesting. Like I
Yeah.
don't have something like that, like this original character that's stuck with me for life, or like comic strips that I've been pursuing ever since I was little.
Did your brother draw at all? Would you
No,
guys draw together?
but that's a good question. I don't like we're 2 years apart. I'm the older one. And we spent a lot of time playing together as kids, but I don't recall him drawing. When we got a little older, maybe like around middle school, he was into music and he was very like he was in
Mm-hmm.
band and he could read
Mm-hmm.
music. And so as we got older, we would like use our little action figures to create movies, and he
Mm.
would compose the music and I would like
Cool.
write the lyrics and stuff like that. So yeah, he was more like musically inclined.
That's cool. I
That's
know.
cool. But you were still doing, even if you weren't drawing comic strips, you were learning and creating your own stories and storytelling, like developing those muscles, which is cool because I would just fill sketchbooks of characters and maybe talk about what they were going to do, but never actually make any stories. You design a whole universe of characters just standing there trying to look cool. It's that's cool that you had the experience of making your own stories.
Yeah,
Even like short films.
I feel like now looking back on it, that was sort of like my thing, is being a storyteller. Like I've never felt that I was a super strong artist. Like I still don't feel that way. Like I'm not the strongest draftsman. I definitely wasn't in college, but I feel like really loving characters and wanting to bring them to life through story is sort of where my heart is.
Yeah, but I also think if you've spent the majority of your imaginative space and time as a kid as like I'm a movie maker, or I'm, I've got a camera and we're doing shots and we're doing, we're acting. I mean, all of that comes into so much into your ability to see, right, what
Mm-hmm.
you want to put down on your panels and on your page, and thinking like a movie director surely helps. And I also said I want to segue eventually into talking about Peanuts, because I know that's another great love of all of ours, but of yours in particular. um that what you just said is also something that Charles Schultz used to say about himself. So Charles Schultz used to always talk about the fact that he wasn't as good as his contemporaries and that he wasn't the greatest artist, and how he wished he was a better artist. And here we are in 2025, and he's created the most beloved thing that anybody's ever created, and I always think, like, did he ever realize it? Or did he ever realize, like, you don't have to be the greatest, quote, drafts person.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of get that magic mix of story, character, the right kind of mark making, and heart, like into something. And it kind of just all gels,
I mean,
which,
he worked on that for 50 years, but man, he like had that down to a science, like the
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
simplicity of his line work and what he didn't show in the panel and like what you saw, it's just, yeah, he's like, his work still really blows my mind.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because like as a kid, I loved the Snoopy cartoons. I would watch them all the time. And as I grew up, like and kind of started reading the Peanuts comics, and then went to like the Schultz Museum and really saw his work. Like, yeah, it's still very touching to me to see like the scope of his work and how beloved it is, and just how I don't know, I feel like every day like I have a Charlie Brown moment or something, there's something that I'm like, oh, that's like this or that from Peanuts. So just how relatable it is.
Yeah,
And here
and
I am with my like
you have your your
I gotta rock.
colored. I got
That's
to
great.
rock.
Charlie Brown's always with me every day.
Right. Yeah. I went on this epic trip to England years ago and went to see like standing stones. And here I am like in this like a magical, majestic, beautiful spot. And I touched it and I went, I got a rock. There was no Scotsman coming out of the rock for me. It's a rock. And that's it. Like it's such a part of our consciousness that, Yeah, but you said that you really fell in love with the animated version of Peanuts
Yeah.
first.
I mean,
Yeah.
just because I grew up in I'm from California, Northern California in the Bay Area, but I grew up just outside the Bay Area. So it was like sort of suburban, sort of rural. It was like a small little town. So like we didn't have access. We didn't have a comic shop. We had a small library, but it wasn't even in our town. It was like 2 towns away. So I didn't have access to comics the way some of my friends did who grew up with
Hmm.
comics, or like kids now, how they're like in school libraries and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see if I had access to those things. Like I remember sometimes seeing my grandpa read the paper, and so in the funnies you would see Peanuts, but I was so little, like I didn't quite understand the humor of
Hmm.
Peanuts,
Mhm.
and but in the animated shorts, they and as a teacher, I taught elementary school for a lot of years. My room was Snoopy themed, so I'd always be
Hmm.
bringing the Peanut specials in for my kids to watch. And it's interesting because like the kids still love Peanuts, and I think what they did so well in the animated shorts is there was always some like physical comedy or like funny business going on with Snoopy that drew you in as a kid. And then like I have to watch Peanuts all the time. It's like every holiday. Like we just watched Easter Beagle a couple weekends ago.
Nice.
Have to. But now like as you get older, like these little funny like witticisms, you catch that as an adult. But then
Mhm.
Hmm.
there's still like the funny business of Snoopy or Woodstock doing their thing. So I think the cartoons were like especially accessible as a kid because whether or not you really understood like what the kids were talking about. I mean, it's like with Lucy, right? Like, isn't she the one that said she wants real estate
Right.
for
Yeah.
the Christmas gift? And when you're a
Yeah.
kid, like you don't understand that
Right.
that's
Right.
funny, but you understand, Snoopy, you know, making fun of the director or doing all these animal sounds. That's funny. So like that's what drew me in as a kid was Snoopy. But as an
Mhm.
adult, I am 100% a Charlie Brown, like all the way. Like Charlie Brown, I love him. He's just,
Yeah.
I relate to him.
I always think about how there could not have been a better pairing to bring Peanuts into animation than Bill Melendez and like the choices that he made. And I know Charles Schultz had a lot to do with it, but when you think about it, like there's so much in all of the animated specials that was so perfect and so unique that no one had done before, whether it's the
And the Vince
choice,
Guaraldi soundtrack too.
the
All of
Yeah.
choice of the jazz, right?
the San Francisco local. So it's kind of interesting because like
Yeah.
we think of productions maybe being more centered in Los Angeles. Like a lot of them were sort of Bay Area located. So that in itself, I think, was a little different. Although Bill Melendez probably was like had the LA animation kind of
Mm.
connections, but
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the kids as like real kids as voice actors. Yeah.
Right.
That's the thing is that to use those real voices was
Mhm.
everything. It just was
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
But yeah, that's still one of my go-tos for background drawing music is Vince Guaraldi or George Winston playing Vince Guaraldi.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. There's certain music that is like it just like it almost like regulates your heartbeat when
Hmm.
you put it on.
Yeah.
Um
I feel like that is like the special thing about animation, and when animation like really like hits it out of the park, it's like utilizing all those things, right? It's like visually great, good voice talent, and then like great music. And when you put all of those things together, it's like so magical. Like you can't, it's like the perfect medium, like when it utilizes all of those things so well.
So you had mentioned that you have been an elementary school teacher. So how long did you do that for?
Yeah. So I always liked school. Like I was always not the teacher's pet, but I enjoyed school and I wanted like to please the teacher and do my best. So I always enjoyed school. And then when I got into, I think probably middle and high school, I would work in summer schools because at that time my mom was a school secretary. And so she was like, okay, if you want a summer job, why don't you work in the schools and you can be an aide in the classroom? So like I was always in school, it's like always a comfortable place for me.
Mm.
And then same thing in college when I went to college and was studying animation and illustration. My summer job would always be coming back to the elementary school and working with the kids. And I never thought that I was going to be a teacher because I always thought like, oh, I'm going to do art. This is how it's going to be. And then after I worked a very short time in animation production, I kind of realized like that wasn't for me. I had really romanticized it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working more on the production side too, which it was hard because like I knew probably being one of the creatives wasn't quite a fit for me. And so then I thought, well, maybe production would be good. I'm really organized, but I love the creative people. So I was so far removed from interacting with artists who I enjoyed being around. It wasn't a great fit for me. So my mom was like, well, you have to do something.
Yeah.
You have to get some kind of job. Why don't you go get your teaching credential? And I did. And so, I found the ironic thing was I actually had felt more creative being a teacher because I got to do things my way and then just like that energy of being with kids, and every day is a little bit different. There's that excitement. Like you don't really know in a way, like things are the same, but they're not. You have new kids every year, having to really think on your feet a lot and be creative because like you
Mm-hmm.
can't just, if a lesson is bombing, you don't just keep going with it.
Right.
Right. So it makes you, I don't know. It's just one of those things where like your day is always goes by really fast for better or for worse. So yeah, I ended up teaching a few years after graduating with
Mhm.
my BA, my art degree. And then I taught for maybe about 15 years. But it was hard because I love teaching. I love being with kids. And that's what sort of reintroduced me to my love of children's books. And then, both of those things kind of came together. But teaching is a really tough job.
Yeah.
And especially when you're working with really young children. And I'm such
Mm-hmm.
an introverted person, like they sucked everything out of me by the end
Yeah.
of the day. Like I was exhausted. So I didn't have the mental or physical energy to come home from teaching and then say like, okay, let me work on my art or this or that.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so it took a while for me to find the balance of like, okay, I still really love art and I miss that part. Like, how can I do both of these things? So it took a while before I was able to do that. And it ended up being comics because I was like, I can make a comic strip and I could do that relatively quickly, a
Mm-hmm.
big book or some large manuscript, like it's not really immediate. And so I can like make a comic, I can post it on Instagram, people can see it. I feel like I made something. And so that's sort of how Reggie was born.
Right.
Yeah.
So what year was Reggie born?
Reggie was probably, gosh, maybe like around 2018, I want to
Okay.
say. But he stemmed from a manuscript that I was working on at the time. So like after a few years of teaching, I was like, this is great. It's a good gig. It's a nice job, but I really like, my heart really misses art. So like, how am I going to do that? So I'm like, I want to be a children's author. So I was like behind the scenes working on it, but in very slow chunks, like, oh, summer break, winter break. So not very
Mm-hmm.
consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been working on manuscripts or like portfolio pieces, and I had written this story about this penguin named Poppy, and I think Jasper the reindeer was her friend, and they had adventures, and it didn't really end up going anywhere. But Reggie
Mm-hmm.
became a side character, and he was like
Ah.
this funky little naughty cousin that she had to babysit. And so, yeah, he kind of like
Came
spun
out
off
of
into
there.
his own thing and stole the show, basically.
That's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
that's great. It's great to hear. I think my awareness didn't happen until um probably I had moved fall of 2019. So I think it was sometime around then that I kind of started noticing all your posts
Yeah, that's
on
probably
Reggie.
about the time when, I had like a decent amount of comic strips under my belt, like for
Mhm.
Reggie. And it was funny because I initially got into comics. Reggie was not like my first comics. I was doing more like journal comics or diary comics. I was reading like Scott McCloud's books and like, okay, let me
Hmm.
do these exercises. For me, just like how a lot of animated shorts were kind of like a testing ground or like a playground for like, how are we going to animate certain effects or something like that?
Hmm.
They do it in the short, right? And then in the feature, they've kind of like figured it out.
Right.
So for me, that was kind of comic strips. They were just like, how do I do this? Oh, I'll
Hmm.
figure it, like they each one was like, they were like a learning tool for me. So originally when Reggie started, I wasn't thinking like, oh, this is going to become a book. This is just like,
Right.
I'm testing it out. I was just thinking like, I don't know how to make comics. Like, let me have fun with it. And
Right.
yeah, right. But sometimes that's the things that you least expect are going to become something that you're doing just for the sheer enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
They resonate or take off.
Yeah. And I even think like if you're doing something without thinking about that goal of getting something published and you're just
Right.
enjoying the making of it, that actually makes it better, right?
Yeah.
And you're actually making something almost better without realizing you are
Hmm.
because you haven't kind of given yourself that, that stressful thing of like I gotta finish a book dummy. I gotta get it out
Right.
there. I gotta submit it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
So were you posting Reggie right away, or did you build up strips for a while, or how'd you start?
Think I did like, I would just make them, and then post it that week. And then it started becoming like trying to do it weekly, and like I think I had a thing for like a hashtag called Webby Wednesday because he has webbed
Mhm.
feet. So
Mhm.
I'd be like, oh, it's Webby Wednesday. Here's another Reggie comic. And so I kind of had set a goal for myself. Like every Wednesday, a new Reggie comes out. And I was doing that for a while.
How long did it take from doing that to getting the idea that did you want to make it into a book or did somebody see it and ask you if you wanted to make it into a book?
Yeah, I don't exactly know like how it fell into place, but again, like I was working on this sort of pitch with Poppy.
Right.
And I think it was called Adventures in Reggie Sitting or something like that. And so she was trying to babysit him. And the whole premise was because in the very early comic strips, Reggie was a little more like two-dimensional.
Mhm.
But like it was just like his trigger word was baby. And anytime like you want baby carrots, he'd freak out and say, like, I'm not a baby.
Right.
Because like when he started, he was a little bit more toddlerish, and now he's
Right.
kind of like elementary school. But that was his whole thing. So this thing was like Poppy's gonna babysit her cousin, but like she can't see babysitting. She has to call it Reggie sitting because he's gonna freak out and he makes a mess of the house. So it actually went out on submission. And like I had done like sample pages and all this thing, like the pitch and the initial feedback was like, okay, like she's sort of like a tween, but she's like a penguin kid. And like animals are like a little bit too babyish for this like tween age range.
Mm.
So you might need, if you want to stick with animal characters, you need to age it
Bring it
down.
down. Yeah.
And so
Mm.
like I was like, well, I've got this little guy Reggie. Maybe he should like maybe I should start making books about him. But even that, like all the iterations of like what a Reggie book, it's kind of silly because I had, yeah, it was like got to a point where I'm like, I don't even know what to do anymore. Cause I had gone through all these iterations. My first attempt at a Reggie dummy was like wordless. I thought like, oh, it's gonna be a wordless comic where like any kid, like regardless of like language acquisition, they can read it because there's very minimal text in it. But then that didn't really work. And so I went through all these phases, and then it got to a point where like it was presentable, but even I knew like, this is not it yet.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, it went to a few editors, but Esther Kaharinga, who's my current editor now on Pip, with
Mhm.
Knopf, at the time she was at Little Brown, she really saw something in it and in Reggie. And so she said, like, I like this, but why don't you make it more like your comic strip? Which was kind of like, duh, like, why didn't I think
Right.
of that?
Yeah.
But she was the one that said, like, well, you have like Reggie playing with roly polies, or he's doing this or that, you know, take like these small moments you have and expand them,
Hmm.
which I was like, yeah, of course, like that makes perfect sense. So that's really how Reggie kind of came to be. And so I think like I still really love that about children's book making, where I kind of have some autonomy, but there's like a collaborative
Right.
element that for me is so necessary. So like she was really great with that. And then again, I was like thinking back to the Charlie Brown and Snoopy show that I loved watching as a kid. And it was sort of like this little variety show where it had like all these different shorts. Like it would have
Hmm.
rerun, and then there'd be a totally different short about Lucy doing something. And I thought, oh, that's how I want the Reggie book to be. Like it's not
Hmm.
one big narrative. Like each
Right.
little, like a bunch of little stories, and each one kind of has a different tone. And so that's what I wanted Reggie to be, like this variety show of Penguin comic.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I like a lot about it is that you do that. So when I was a kid, I loved Archie comics. And when I was little, I loved the little Archie comics. And the little Archie comics digests had this kind of feel where you had little stories and then you'd have something like an interstitial or some page, like, in between. And then you'd have the next little story.
Yeah.
That was like everything because you weren't getting one book, you were getting like three stories and then this other content like in between
Mm,
the stories, and that's that you do that well with the
right?
Reggie books. Yeah, it's like it's getting to see more of your character's life than just the getting that one story. So you get to
Hmm.
know the character better, you
It's
know.
fun when I do like school visits and interact with kids, because I always ask them like, "What's your favorite Reggie story?" And they all kind of a different one resonates with them, so it's kind of fun to see like which one they sort of connect with.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you said is true. Like it's the best thing that can happen with children's books if you're working with somebody and it's a collaboration and they can level you up. You
Mhm.
know, like, what you have is pretty good, but then they'll make a suggestion and it's just like, now
Yeah,
I see it, now I can get it. Yeah. So you mentioned that you did work in animation for a little bit in production. So what was that? What was that
very
like?
little bit. Yeah, so again, like I went to San Jose State University, and so they had animation illustration program. So it wasn't far from home. Like I lived on, it was far enough to not really commute there, but close enough where I could like come home on weekends and see my family. I am the first person on my mom's side of the family to have like a 4-year degree. So it was really important to my
Mm.
mom. Like she knew
Hmm.
ever since we were little, she's like, you and your brother are going to school. Like you're going to get your degree. So I was very fortunate that they helped pay for my college, for my schooling, because she's like, that's non-negotiable. Like you are going to school. But part of that also is like, you are also going to go get a 4-year, like you're going to get a bachelor's degree. So they didn't want me, my mom didn't want me going to like a traditional art school, which again, the tuition was much higher at like
Hmm.
Academy of Art or a place like that in San Francisco. But she kind of was like, you can study animation illustration, that's fine, but you need to go to like a state school where you have a degree to fall back on, which in hindsight, like
Hmm.
now that worked out because with teaching, I was
Right.
able to do that after I graduated, just go get my extra schooling for my credential. But they had and still have a really strong program at San Jose State for animation and illustration. It was sort of at the time like bits and pieces of everything. So like you took a class where you flip paper and you animate, then you'd have a visual development, then you'd have like traditional National Geographic style illustration where you would like create this, they called it the tide pool class. You'd have to get all of these reference images and make your own like underwater things. So we were learning a lot of traditional skills. And the whole time I'm thinking like, this is great. Like I'm going to work as a storyboard artist. I can't wait. And so maybe midway through schooling, I did an internship at Film Roman. So yeah, I mean, The Simpsons was going on at the time. King of the Hill was going on at the time. And then like different different floors of the building sort of had different productions. You can poke your head in and see like what's going on here and here. And for me, it was interesting because with The Simpsons, you noticed how, like, here I was as a kid seeing the reluctant dragon. And you're like, oh my goodness, like these people just have such a, this is like the job of all jobs. And then
Right.
you go to Film Roman and they're like, here's like all the in-betweens that are getting shipped to Korea. And I was like, oh, that's not very fun for them. Like they're just like getting this, like you draw Homer, do this, this, this. And I was like,
Yeah.
it made me a little sad, but I understand like they need to be efficient, blah, blah, blah. So like I got a glimpse of that. And then there were other production. I think there were like something for Nickelodeon going on another floor. And then these old timey guys that I was like kind of took me under their wing were like layout artists. So they're doing like very traditional like backgrounds and stuff. And to them, it's like it was a job. You know, they weren't like, I love animation.
Right.
Like a lot of them worked in comics and things like that too. And so, yeah, it was cool. Like I got to see a lot of sides of things, but I sort of had this sort of realization, like, I don't think I'm cut out to be an artist in animation because I just never have had the drive. Like we had some kids in our program that like carried their sketchbook like with them no matter what. Like they'd be attending a friend's wedding and they're like busting out, you know, doing sketches. I never had that kind of drive where like I had to be drawing all the time. I like to draw, like if it communicates something, but I'm also a very like observer. So like if I'm somewhere, I want to just kind of watch and listen. I don't want to be trying to do all this life drawing. And so I thought like, okay, I don't really have the drawing chops to do this or really the drive. Like I don't really, I'm stubborn in the sense where like, I'm not going to put in hours and hours so I can learn how to do like ILM style map paintings. That's just not who I am.
Yeah.
So I thought, but I still love animation. So maybe I should kind of start preparing for the production side of it. And then that way I could still be involved with animation, but sort of use like, you know, organizational skills. So once I got back from that summer internship, I started minoring in the film department. And so I took classes in like film production and screenwriting. And the screenwriting classes were really like my favorite. I really enjoyed that, but learned a lot of like production skills. So by the time I graduated, I was looking for like production jobs and I got a job as a production assistant at ILM in San Francisco.
That's
which
cool.
sounds really cool. But
It does sound cool.
I mean, it was cool like being there and seeing the Yoda fountain and stuff. But you know, there's just like the logistic of working in animation and really how long of days they are. And for me, like I was a kid right out of school. I had no money. So I couldn't afford and this is like, gosh, like not quite 20 years ago, but San Francisco is still expensive. It's not what it is now, but I couldn't afford a little tiny apartment. So at the time, my then boyfriend, who's now my husband, his family lived about an hour away. So I'm like, can I crash at your house at least? And then like drive, but it was like a 2-hour drive into the Presidio in the morning, then your 10-hour animation day, and then 2 hours back. And I was just like, oh my God, like my day is basically wake up, eat breakfast, drive 2 hours, be in this windowless building, and then like do it all over again. And I was just like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, maybe I need to like think about something different. And I still really love animation. I think I still have this dream of like, well, maybe one day one of my books can become animated. I can still, still be involved. But yeah, so that was like my very, very short stint in animation. In production.
You were in it. You're gonna be an
willing, like you said, to be like, I'm just gonna eat ramen, the instant ramen indefinitely. And then there is like the instability of it, right? Like your production is canceled, you're out of a job like that. It's tough.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, it's not an easy industry to be in. And I think one thing that I really realized, and like I said, I still have friends who work in animation. I have so much admiration and love for animation.
Oh yeah.
I just felt when I made the decision, like, okay, this isn't for me, like I'm going to leave. And like I said, I was in production. So it didn't have the same like fun and energy vibe that you have in the creative departments.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But something I felt very conscious of when I was working in animation production is how replaceable I was. Like,
Right.
if I walk out that door, there's like 5 dozen people waiting to take my place. And it's a weird feeling because, like, again, like you're a kid, you're watching The Reluctant Dragon. You think everybody is like the milk call or the
Yeah,
Right.
little
right.
Right.
girl.
But I think there was a time when that existed. There was a time when the studio system was a career, right? If you were
Yes.
somewhere, you were going to have that job. As long as you did a great job, you were going to be there, you
Yeah.
know.
And
Yeah,
not
and
just
and
that
that
though, like
that dissolved in the 90s for
mhm.
sure.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
after that boom. But not just that, I think, like, whenever you see I mean, I even find myself falling into that trap sometimes when I was like, I really loved Turning Red from
Mhm.
Pixar that came out a few years ago, and I watched the behind the scenes, I thought like, "Oh, they're so cool, I wish I worked with
Yeah.
them." But you kind of forget when you see the behind the scenes how many people behind that production that are not, like, the head of story or the head of this or that.
Right.
And so, it takes a long time of working hard. It takes like
Mhm.
a certain level of talent and skill to get those positions. And
Yeah.
so,
No. Yeah.
I think there's like a big like reality check when you
Yeah.
work in animation.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, it's so easy to romanticize it as a kid
Mhm.
and as a young artist, and then it can be a cold splash of water when you actually see the realities of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've actually this year I've taught an intro to animation class. So there are a bunch
Nice.
of 19-year-olds who, I saw them fall in love with it. Like I watched them make the ball bounce, make a flour sack
But
move,
that,
do the first walk cycle. And I was so like, it was one of those like moments where I was like, I remember this feeling, like where
Yeah.
you just fall in love with that. You learn like, wow, look what I did. I made it. And I both felt bad about like kind of making them fall in love with something that I'm like, I don't know if you'll ever get a job in it. Like, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to encourage this. But so many of them, there was a good percentage of them that were just so interested in just doing their own indie animation and just putting it out there. And I thought, okay, well, if that's going to be a cool new wave of this, then more power to you, you
yeah.
know?
I
Yeah.
think that's great. I mean, once I kind of started getting into comics in college because I met a lot of cool new, like nerdy art friends, and they're like, "Oh, you should read comics." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not like that into superheroes." And they're like, "No, like there's way more
Yeah.
about
Right.
comics than that." And that's when I was like, oh, "Okay." And so learned about all these different things. And I would kind of doodle in my sketchbook and do comics. But yeah, I think that's really cool. Like I have friends who were like, I'm just going to make zines and do this kind of thing. I think there's something like very, I don't know, because or at least the program that I went to, it's like if you're not working in feature animation, you haven't quite made it. Like, so that's great if you're in games, but you didn't quite. And so when I left animation, I felt like Charlie Brown, like failure face, I was
Yeah.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like I can't, I'd like, yeah, I'm Mr. Sack. He's my favorite. I was like,
Yes.
where's my paper bag? Nobody look at me right now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
now that I'm like older and I sort of care less about those things, I think like, wow, the people that were just like, I like to do it. This is my way of doing it. I'm going to put it out there. There's something like really cool about that, and something where you're kind of, I don't know, you have this ownership over your work that maybe you definitely don't have in like a larger production company. So that's
Yeah.
cool to hear. Like it's nice that kids are kind of like, I'm going to make art because I love making art. And I think you can't be disappointed that way, right? I mean, unless
Yeah.
I think you're like, oh, if it doesn't get X amount of views on YouTube, I'm
Yeah. They're going to have their own reality check at some
yeah,
point because they're going to have to eat ramen, like you said. Like they're gonna have their own reality check, but yet, I guess one of the things that we didn't have, when we were that young, is we didn't have the internet to do this, and the internet, even when it was there, wasn't yet what it is now. So the idea of being able to just make your content and put it out there, it's a cool thing that they have that there's that accessibility for people to view what they make. Hopefully they'll find a way to make money.
Some of my students, their favorite cartoon is just some YouTube channel I've never heard of, or they're just their
Mm-hmm.
favorite artists are making waves and creating their own work on YouTube. So
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
exciting.
I guess it all comes down to like accessibility again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was a kid, we didn't have YouTube and things like that. So you saw either what was on TV or in the movie theaters.
Yep.
And it's like sad to say, but like that era of animation, of like studio animation, is not what it used to be. And
Yeah, it's
so
pretty
it
Mhm.
makes like,
precarious. Yeah.
yeah, like kids aren't really being raised on that now, right? And so they're like all the streaming stuff is sort of their inspiration, which is cool because I remember being in school for animation, and we had a guest speaker come once, and he was kind of griping about like the state of animation at the time, which was like 20 years ago. But he made this like analogy that kind of like resonated with me, and he was basically saying like, if you Xerox a Xerox of a Xerox, right? Like each time the
Right.
quality is going to get bad. And I think he was
Right.
talking about like your sources. So if you're only looking at like something that's been done that's kind of was a copy of, a copy of a
Right.
copy. So like kind of thinking about going back to fundamentals and stuff. But if kids are sort of looking at something that's new and fresh and then that's their inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
maybe something kind of cool and new comes of that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even like with Flo winning the Academy Award,
Mm.
it was kind of a moment like, oh, you made that on Blender? That's something that people can use, and that people can go, oh, if that was done and that could win an Academy Award, then that was an independent film. So, it kind of, again, it's all those things of, oh, is that possible? I'm not sure. It is possible. So it probably will usher in more interesting, kind of unique stories and how they look and how they're made.
I think we need that right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Last spring, I went to, I think it was a San Francisco Film Festival. Like, I don't go to a lot of film festivals or watch a lot of like animation film festivals, but this particular one, I wanted to see like this stop motion short that was called Bottle George that was premiering there. And so it was like this co production between Tonko House,
Mm.
Cool.
yeah, and Dwarf Studios in Japan. So like
Mhm.
this kind of co-production, but like I love stop motion, so I'm like I got to go to San Francisco. I got to see this. I mean, beautiful, beautiful stop motion film. But then there was this other film there, and I don't speak French, so I'm probably not saying it right, but it's called something like Björk, which translated to English is yuck. And it
Mhm.
Mhm.
was like it's won a lot of festivals, and it was an Oscar nominated short this past year. And I can't wait for it to kind of be out there for people to see, because I
Yeah.
was just like, this is so good. Like it was so weird and creative. And the whole premise is made in France by like this little indie group of people. But the whole premise was like it starts out like, I remember there's like a pool and stuff. So I don't know if it's sort of like a campground, but there's like an older couple. It's like a little old man, a little old lady sitting in their lounge chairs. And all of a sudden, their lips turn like hot pink sparkly. It's like an effect. And you're like, what in the hell is this? It's like so weird. And then like they smooch. And so
Mhm.
this story is about this little boy who's probably like 10, 11, and he's just starting to get these feelings of like, what's it like when you kiss somebody? And
Mm.
so they're observing, the kids are kind of going around like the pool area, like watching people kiss or make out, and things are like, ooh. And anytime people get the desire to kiss, like it's this effect. It's like this pink purpley sparkle that's
Mhm.
on the lips. And so the little boy, like his lips start to turn pink and sparkly, and he's like, oh my gosh, because he's starting to like want to like maybe have a crush and kiss, but like a lot of his friends are like, ew, every time they see someone kiss, they'll go,
Right.
ew. So yeah, it's so cute. And like everyone in the theater was like laughing. And I just
Right.
thought like, that's it, right? Like it's these stories that are like universal and so sincere and genuine. And that's what we need more.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and even then you said that, and everybody in the theater is laughing. That's an experience that I miss. It doesn't happen as often anymore. As like
Yeah.
actually seeing these things with a group of people. Um, and experiencing that. Yeah, because I keep a YouTube channel for now. I'm teaching, which is like it's drawing for animation, and it's a character design class. And we have this never ending YouTube channel that we just keep adding, and they'll tell me things and I'll throw them on. And then we always watch a few during class. So I will look for those. But like just discovering like student films, like we're always looking for student films and we watch them. Some of them are weird, some of them are bad, some of them are awesome. Yeah, it's really cool.
It's cool seeing if you ever hunt down like Pete Docter student films or people like that, Rebecca Sugar student animation. It's like it's cool to see people that went on to bigger things, but they still had a cool spark and made some weird, fun student animation.
Yeah.
So one of the things Chris and I we were talking before you joined us, we were sharing our favorite pages out of Reggie. So again, like one of the cool things that when you went from doing the web comic to doing the actual books is, you've expanded this whole world, and the friends that Reggie has are just so fun and cute and charming the way that you draw them. So that was a whole nother thing. Like the character design, going from just having your penguin characters that you kind of had, and now they have all of these different animals. Were there any other cartoonists that you kind of feel have really influenced you, or other favorites that kind of like seeped into your brain?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely growing up watching animation, I think my cartooning is definitely influenced by animation as far as like the silhouetting of poses and things like that, you know.
Yeah, the
And then just
gesture.
trying to keep your character design simple because like animation with comics, you're drawing this character over and over and over. But it was the nice thing was having the comic strip as a way to test those things out and kind of refined Reggie's design a little bit. And even
Mhm.
now with the book that I just submitted final art on, that's coming out next year called Pip and Pals. She's a little otter
Mhm.
named Pip. I was like, I learned some lessons from Reggie where I was like, that was fun. Like the first time I drew the 80 pages, but then when I
Right.
had to ink it and color it, like we're scaling back for this one. So you kind of learn as you go. But when I actually got into comics in college, but then I was sort of reintroduced to them when I was teaching because every year my goal was to expand my classroom library, like wherever it was lacking, try to acquire books. And so there was one particular year where like comics were starting to get more prevalent in children's publishing. I thought, I don't have a lot of those in my classroom library. So I was just going to the library and checking out books just to see what was out there in kids comics. And then I like really resonated with me, which is how I transitioned. But Sarah, I don't know if I'm saying her last name right. Sarah Varon.
Baron.
Yeah,
I
Varon.
love
Once I
Sarah
started
Baron.
looking at, like you see a lot of comics and I would just think like, I'm not good enough to draw. Like my drawing's not good enough to do these. So like once I started, and not saying like her drawing's not good, but she has just this like it doesn't have to be like you say like the best
Right.
draftsmanship. Like it's her own unique style and it's playful and fun. And
Yeah.
so her comics really helped me think like, oh,
Yeah.
like you can be really cartoony, like it doesn't have to be like Marvel style
Oh
technical.
no. She's one of my favorites. She really is. She had
I
done
love.
a picture book called Odd Duck. Have you ever seen
I
that?
have.
It's one of my favorite picture books that I own. And like there's every now and then someone will do a book and you're like, even the idea of just like it is an odd duck. The character is odd. It is an odd duck. It's weird. It's a weird duck. And it's just like it's a moment of genius. Like it's such a simple concept. It's
I'm a big
genius, and like it's so good. She did Bake Sale, right?
and new shoes is one that she has. She has like
Mhm.
Detective Sleepy. I'm actually looking at my desk right now. I was very fortunate because maybe it was like around pandemic times, but she's very involved with like fundraising for animal shelters and things that she
Mm.
was doing. That's like, if
Yeah.
you donate X amount of money, I'll do a pet portrait. At the time, like I was like, are you sure I can't pay you more? Because like you're really like undercharging for this. But yeah, I commissioned her to like make portraits of
Cool.
all three of my pets. So this
Yeah.
one's on my desk because
That's
Gigi,
great.
our kitty Gigi, passed away last fall. So I have my Sarah Varon portrait of her. But yeah, her art I really, really enjoy. And that
Yeah.
is
And
one that kind of that kind of gave me that push, like, just try it. You can do it.
Yeah, for sure. And also, again, someone who has a very unique, their own visual voice, you can't mistake it. Like you see her work and you know who it
And
is.
then someone whose work got adapted into animation with
Yeah,
robot. So
yeah.
that's really cool.
Robot
You know,
Junior.
it's interesting too, because I've even heard like you don't have to be the best at drawing to make comics. But I do think there's something to be said about comics. Like with animation, especially 2D animation, you have to have a certain level of drawing to, number one, just make it happen, but have
Mhm.
the continuity and not have your character's eyeballs going all around
Right.
their head. With comics, you don't have to be on model all the time. But I think sometimes being too good at drawing or having too beautiful of art in
Mhm.
comics almost defeats the purpose, because comics is so much about controlling the pacing and the flow and how someone's reading. So you have to be very careful, because I read some comics by illustrators that are like amazing illustrators, but I almost
Mhm.
think like some of these panels are almost distracting in a way, because the drawing's
Yeah.
so good that I'm just like staring at all of the beautiful details in this panel and not is preventing me from
Right.
reading it, you know?
Yeah.
So
That can affect the flow. It may be a gorgeous illustration, but it stops you just to look at the illustration, and then maybe it's hard for them to keep up the consistency with that kind of detail. So yeah, you see a
or
lot of accomplished illustrators maybe aren't the best storytellers. Whereas if you're a good storyteller, you can have stick figures in your comic,
Yeah.
and you know,
yeah. And I think, I mean, Charles Schultz was like, it's almost like when something's so simple, you think it's easy, but it's not. It's almost harder to be that simple. But like you think
Mhm.
of how little he puts in the background, but you know,
You know where you are.
that's someone's yard or whatever. If you think about, you could put every little leaf on it on a tree, and that like how that's not necessary in a comic. So yeah, it's kind of like about scaling back too. So anytime I would read work that had that level of like simplicity and cartooniness, I think it kind of that inspires me and helps kind of push me, you know.
cool. Any other like cartooning mentors you had, whether it's in school or animation or comics, when you started getting into making your own comics, that kind of helped you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like sometimes I don't realize how influenced I am by Charles Schultz, just because like he's Charles Schultz. He's so amazing. I could never be that. But I sometimes like realize I don't realize how much of an impact it had on me sometimes until like I see what I do and what he does. I'm like, oh my gosh, his work really, I think, had a big impact on me. And then just like contemporary people like Aaron Nels Steinke, who's a friend who we work with on Sunday Haha.
Mhm.
When he was publishing his Mr. Wolf's comics through
Right.
Scholastic, at the time I was teaching and sort of like hoping to be a published artist. And so I was kind of learning about him, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Here's this guy who's a teacher and he's making this comic about like anthropomorphic animals,
Mhm.
just kind of slice of life. Because I think for me too, like I like sort of slice of life type of things, but like a little quirkiness. So it's nice to read books that aren't always about this huge, dramatic, high stakes
Right.
thing. So his work was really cool, because I'm like, oh, it's just like a slice of life, these little animal kids at school. And so his work really kind of helped like inspire me when I was, yeah, I'm very like new to comics, to be honest. Like around 2016, 2017 is when I really started making comics and trying to make comics. But I do think like having my background in illustration and learning
Mhm.
the technical aspects of drawing have always been really beneficial and helpful.
So the new book you said, Pip and Pals, has an otter.
Yes,
Is it a sea otter or a river otter?
he's a river otter, but the second book will have a sea otter in it.
Okay, yeah. Cool. That's awesome. Is there any chance that there's any juggling involved?
No juggling. I don't want to give too much away because the book doesn't come out until next
Right,
summer,
right,
so summer
yeah.
2026. There's some, let's just say in this first book, they build a spaceship. So there's some interesting things going on in Pip's
Cool.
world. Yeah.
Cool. Have you ever seen the videos with river otters juggling?
They're so cute. There's like this one channel on YouTube, I think it's called Hana and Kotaro. They're pets. And so I'm a little conflicted watching it, because I'm like, they're wild animals. They're in Japan, where like you're allowed to or have been allowed to have otters as pets, but the people really do like take good care of them. Like they on their
Mhm.
balcony they have a swimming pool that they
Mhm.
replace like every season. So I mean they really do their best to care for these pets. They're not domestic animals, but yeah, they are very, very
Mhm.
cute. Yeah, the way they and like I didn't realize until watching the videos that like the sound they make almost like this weird honking sound. Like
Mm.
it's just like the sound through their nostrils. But yeah, the one otter's a little bit chunky and likes to eat, and so she's always like every time she goes and like fish or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize like otters make this really obnoxious, crazy sound.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's funny. But you can just watch hours of those and it counts as research.
I know,
That's
right?
great.
Yeah, they did. We did go to Japan last fall, but I didn't go to an otter cafe for that reason. I was like, "Ah, it's probably not really ethical, but part of me wanted to go just so I
Yeah.
could
Yeah, they had otter. Like they
hug
have
an
cat
Yeah.
otter.
cafes, they have
Cat
otter
and
cafes.
dog, but yeah.
Yeah.
They have everything cafes, miniature pig cafes, hedgehog cafes. I think they have a lot of different animal cafes. But we went to one cafe, but we went to like a rescue cat cafe
Mm.
that
Cool.
would help little kitties who are
Yeah.
trying to find a home.
Was it really super inspiring to be in Japan? Did you like take in the sights and go
Yeah,
like,
I
wow?
mean, that's like a whole other segment in itself.
Yeah.
But that was, yeah, that was fun. I mean, we did like a lot of nature things, and then we also did a lot of like nerdy pop culture things. So, like, we went to the Nintendo Museum, which had just opened in Kyoto, which was really amazing and well designed and just made with so much love. And then the Ghibli Museum, of
Yeah.
course,
Oh,
that was
cool. Yeah.
amazing, like, so
Yeah.
wonderful to see. And then a few days at Tokyo Disneyland.
Well, for your writing process, do you thumbnail first or do you do like outline first? How do you kind of approach?
It's a little bit of both, but I think probably everything starts visual because normally it starts with the character for me. So it starts with like the picture, this drawing of this character, and then fleshing out like who they are. But yeah, with comics, like it's been a learning experience because I have a background in screenwriting. Like some of my initial stories, I went like full on, like wrote a script, and then I realized once I started thumbnailing, like it was like don't need that, don't need that, don't, like
Right.
you're changing so much of it, developing so much visually. So I try to just work with like a basic outline and then in thumbnails craft a lot of the
Okay.
story.
And are you approaching this new book differently than the Reggie stuff?
Just because Pip is one continuous narrative, so it's like same page count as Reggie, about the same like reader age, but because Pip is just a different structure of story for
Mm-hmm.
hers, I did have a little bit more of a structured outline, whereas Reggie, it was like kind of each story was a paragraph, like this is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what happens, and then I could thumbnail. Yeah, with Pip. But now I'm working on a middle grade story. That's like a new challenge for myself. So that I went and full on did like a very detailed synopsis because I figured like I really need to have the story's more complex. So I needed to have the pieces figured out a little bit more.
Thanks. Yeah, your comics are so, and I can see the connection with Peanuts and that kind of comics because they're so clear and
Thank
like
you.
it's like streamlined, but not. It's like so simple, but no simpler than it needs to be. It's like just a perfect balance. It's like even as something like the amount of words per panel balloon, it's like sometimes people get really bogged down, and but I just feel like the flow is just really nice and the clarity is really great.
You. I mean, I think part of that is me being a little bit like of a lazy artist where I don't find myself like super great at drawing and I don't want to draw any more than I need to. So I think part of that is from that. But I definitely do try to be conscious of streamlining like dialogue and not having it
Hmm.
be too wordy. Not just like to engage the young readers, but also I find like sometimes I think shows now, a lot of sitcoms are too much talking, like
Mm.
too much talking. And not like you said in comics, like it's just visually off putting to have a huge block of text and a word balloon, right? But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but also, you have that experience as a teacher and you're conscious of the age and the level of your reader too. And
Hmm.
I think that that's part of it too is you're creating these books kind of like as a perfect. It's the perfect like they're perfect, Jen.
Thank you. I'm using you for my next blurb, my cover blurb. Say
Yes.
that being a teacher has helped a lot. Like I can't imagine making books for little kids, and I don't have children of my own,
Right.
but like being around kids and being tapped into their sensibility
Mm-hmm.
really helps a lot. And I haven't been in the classroom, my own classroom, for a couple years, but I still teach after school comics cartooning classes
Mm,
because not only is it fun for me and it gets me out of the house,
Mm-hmm.
but I find like creatively I need to be interacting with kids because I
Yeah.
think it's like you said, so easy to lose touch of like how they speak and what is interesting to them and how they act. And
Yeah.
definitely like we don't want to make it like how we think they should act, or how, like
Right.
it's
Right.
about representing children. That's something that I really hope like comes through with Reggie, is even though he's like a little crazy penguin dressed like Dennis the Menace,
Yeah,
but
but he's very
I want
real.
to
Yeah.
feel like sincere representation of a child where he
Yeah.
gets cranky sometimes, and that's okay. Like we all do. So that's
Yeah.
what I hope comes through with Reggie.
Yeah, and I really do, like, I feel like when I read a comic for kids and it really like knocks me over, like I have my standouts. My standouts are usually in a pile while the other
Mm,
ones are like on my shelf. Like they go on my
hmm.
shelf, they stay on my shelf, but I usually keep the ones that I like the most closer to look at more often. And I just recently I did like a short thing to talk about Gnome and Rat. Do you know the Gnome and Rat books by Lauren
yeah,
Stoller?
Florence
I love
Four, yeah.
those.
I mean, she's someone where I look at her work and I'm like, my work doesn't look as good as her, like
Yeah.
imposter
Well,
syndrome, right?
we
Because
all do
her,
that to
yeah,
ourselves.
but yeah, her work is really fun and cute and lively.
Yeah, yeah, but again, like that's her voice,
Mhm.
right? And you have yours. And like I think I mentioned recently to Chris, like have you ever seen these are a little bit older books, Peter and Ernesto by
Mhm.
Graham Annable.
Yeah, and he's an
Yep.
animator,
Yeah,
so
Right.
that comes
Right.
through in his art.
for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah. So we just want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It's been awesome to finally get to have a conversation with you. Um,
It's always fun to
Yeah. So
chat
you two have known each other for a few years, but never really
yeah,
met.
never actually met. So
because we're on
it's a lot of
different
fun.
coasts.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could let us know where people could find you online.
Yeah, my website is reggiecomic.com, REGGIE comic.com. I am going to do a website overhaul soon to make room for Pip because right now it's like Reggie Central, but you can find me at reggiecomic.com. And then I'm a little bit active on social media. It's Jen Deo Art, Jen DEO Art, mostly on Instagram, a little bit on Blue Sky.
Awesome.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, thanks
And
so much.
when is Pip coming out?
Pippin Pals is out next summer. I don't have the exact date yet. So summer 2026 for the first book. And then the second book should be the year following.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. You're going to be busy.
Yeah.
that's the
I'm
hope,
excited
right?
to hear more about the middle grade one as soon as you can talk about it.
Yeah, right now it's not a thing yet. It's still like in development and ready to go out on submission hopefully soon. But yeah, I'm hoping I can share some good news about it
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
It's
you.
been
It was so
fun.
nice to talk to you both.